Okay, so we're going to look at a good example of an IMC, Integrated Marketing Communications Plan in Action. So although this is an old campaign, as I said, it's a good example, and that's why we are using it. Guinness have, over the decades, always had successful campaigns and frequently used as a showcase of best practice and so on. So it's not anything. We're not promoting drinking or anything, just using the marketing that they have, and they make public the information so we can see what it is they were planning. So as I said, this is an IMC. The campaign was called Guinness Area 22. So we'll just read down through it and see what it's all about, and hopefully it will help to this as a case study kind of helps put the theory into perspective for you and makes it a little bit clearer as to what is going on. So firstly, the first page here starts with the setting the scene. So the market overview here on the left. The Irish beer market is one of the most competitive beer markets in the world. Hugely brand loyal market, with consumers asking for their beer brand by name. So people typically would ask for Guinness rather than saying stout, for example. And it's a very profitable market with strong margins for successful brands. The pub business is bigger than the off-license trade for this brand. So this is obviously setting the scene from their own perspective. Guinness accounts for 4 out of every 10 pints consumed in pubs at the time of this campaign anyway. And Guinness is the #1 beer brand in Ireland, second biggest beer brand, and their main competitor is Heineken. So that will have relevance as we move on. So we want to identify who are biting at our heels essentially to get that first place. If we are #1, excuse me, everybody else is trying to achieve what we have, and we are constantly having to defend our position. So as I said, Guinness have a very good track record of having good campaigns over the decades. So on the left, that set the scene just in terms of the beer. Now, somebody's big idea is, let's talk about rugby. So now we're kind of going to set the scene in that context. So what is the link? Is there a link between Guinness and rugby? So Guinness has a long history of involvement with rugby, both in Ireland and internationally. Currently, again, this is at the time of the campaign or leading up to the campaign. Excuse me. Luckily, germs can't transmit through the camera. So currently Guinness is the official sponsor of the Six Nations tournament, English Rugby Football Union, Irish Rugby Football Union, Leinster team, Munster team. So that's where what they have going on right now. So moving into the challenge. So what are they aiming to do now? Why are we talking about Guinness in relation to rugby? So in a highly competitive market with decreasing, we're on the left here, decreasing drinking occasions and tough competition from Heineken through their sponsorship of European Cup or the Heineken Cup, Guinness was faced with a huge challenge to deliver meaningful cut through. That's how we get through the noise of everything else, to have our stuff noticed and other people's ignored. So deliver meaningful cut through in a way that would increase affinity scores and in turn drive volume and recruit advocates through rugby activation. Now, there's a lot of terminology in that. So cut through, as I said, is all about how we can make our communications noticed. So it's about cutting through the noise and being heard and being seen and being noticed and remembered. Affinity is that connection. So affinity score is that association. So when people think of rugby, what's the brand? If somebody said, name a brand that you associate with rugby, so that would be an affinity score. How many people say Guinness in this case? So they're trying to increase, they want to increase affinity score. So they want more people to answer Guinness when asked that question. They do surveys to figure out what the baseline is, and then at the end of the campaign they can then see how has that changed. And driving volume is sales basically, so they want to, over the campaign, to increase the sales of Guinness. Obviously that's the bottom line, literally and figuratively. And recruit advocates. So recruiting means that people who didn't ordinarily drink Guinness start drinking Guinness instead of, for example, Heineken. So winning them over from other brands. It's not about trying to get non-drinkers to start drinking. It's to move people from other brands, and particularly they're targeting Heineken. So they're trying to win Heineken drinkers over to switching to drinking Guinness instead. And that's why they keep naming Heineken, because Heineken has that association also with rugby. So now we've got the challenge is kind of a big picture, broad aim, and we're starting to refine down. We have goals now. We have 2 goals listed here. Replace Heineken as #1 sponsor of Irish rugby. And #2, recruit 10,000 new drinkers into Guinness, the Guinness brand in 2011. So that's when the campaign is running. As I said, it is an old campaign, but it is still appropriate to discuss as a great case study to show how IMC's work in having a central theme that same vibe running through. In this case, it's going to be rugby, as you might be guessing. That's the central theme that's going to run through everything they do across this campaign. But now we're refining down. We had an overall aim, and now we're getting into SMART objectives. So in the course of the campaign, so that means that both are time bound. That's the T of SMART. They are specific. So the first one is replacing as the official sponsor of rugby. So that's a very specific thing. It's measurable. We can see it's actionable. It's realistic. It ticks all the boxes for a SMART objective. And #2, recruit 10,000 new drinkers into the Guinness brand in 2011. So again, it is specific. So we're looking for new drinkers, switching brands basically. So that's the specificity. Measurable. It is something. We'll see later on how this can be measured. It can be approximated in a sense, and we'll see that later. SMA, actionable, realistic, and time bound. Okay, so 10,000 seems, for a large brand like Ireland a large brand like Guinness in Ireland. It seems it is a realistic. If it was like a startup brewery, perhaps 10,000 would be wildly ambitious, but 10,000 seems like a realistic and achievable target for a large company like Guinness to aim for. You always want your targets to be, although you want them to be ambitious, you want something that you have to work for and push you to kind of try and achieve it. But it has to be attainable. So that's achievable, attainable, that's the A of SMART. And so there we have the two SMART objectives in this case. Moving on then. All the images are taken from throughout the campaign as well. So they've used the same. So they had a specific logo for the whole campaign, Area 22 Guinness with the harp. And obviously that's carried through the whole document. And they're proud of their marketing campaigns, and that's why they make them public. This is, we're able to see this because it's something that was published. It's not something that they are ashamed of. The nicotine companies, for example, their marketing campaigns, they would not be making public because they do not want people to see the way they target. Okay, so the national context. So again, we're zooming back out to see what are we looking at in the big picture. Rugby as a sport has enjoyed considerable growth in popularity over the last few years or decades, resulting in an increasing number of sponsors. The Irish national team now has 23 sponsors. So again, this is around 2010, before the campaign kicked off or thereabouts. The Munster team 20, Leinster 19. That has created significant amount of noise around rugby, making it more challenging for a brand to break through the clutter. Harder to be noticed if you're one of 20 or one of 60, essentially, taking all three. To be successful then, Guinness needed to be bold in their approach and integrate their activations across multiple channels to create maximum amount of consumer impact. So the integrate here is that integrated element of your IMC as well. So going back to the goals, we're trying to refine them a little bit into categorized objectives. So in terms of awareness, they want to be seen as the number one sponsor of rugby in Ireland. So when we had it listed as a goal, it was just to replace Heineken as the number one sponsor. So they are two different things. To be the number one sponsor is different than to be seen as the number one sponsor of rugby in Ireland. We'll see what we mean in a second. Number two, so in terms of participation, so converting awareness, so we're moving them along. They know about the brand, obviously. So converting awareness into deep interaction with Guinness, with the brand, via enhanced rugby experiences. And number three, switching the 10,000 drinkers from competitor brands into Guinness, becoming Guinness drinkers. So the strategy is, how do we achieve that? So the challenge is to replace Heineken, as we've said, as number one sponsor of Irish rugby and recruit 10,000 new drinkers into the Guinness brand. The insight that we know fans of rugby in Ireland want to make the most of rugby occasion, because this makes them feel more alive and more connected. So that kind of knowledge about our customers is part of the reason that this campaign has been chosen. So that's there. And then we'll just kind of move across the top before I roll down the page a second. The consumer proposition is about putting Irish fans at the heart of Irish rugby like no other brand can. So we're giving those Irish fans of rugby an experience and some deeper connection with rugby as well. So, and then the consumer participation idea. This is all about to create shared experiences on and offline that enhance the rugby occasion and ignite conversions while immersing consumers in Guinness rugby. Now, this will all become clear as we move on, so we still have a lot to talk about. So the strategy, how are we going to do this? How did Guinness do this? Leverage Guinness rugby sponsorship assets to, number one, or A, bring fans closer to rugby by engaging them through social channels, and B, on the other side, to collaborate with the pub trade around unique rugby events, enhance fans' participation with the brand on and offline. So then the activation approach, brand created content. So before key rugby weekends, consumers and media outlets become increasingly eager for information, analysis, and content. There is a demand for rugby related stuff. People want to read about rugby, they want to watch programs about rugby, watch online content, and so on. There is that demand there. So that's, again, something that we're going to use to our advantage and give it to them. So to allow fans get closer to rugby, we developed a roadshow that visited 14 key rugby pubs across the country, creating unique Guinness branded rugby content. The shows were created, produced and managed by us, Guinness, to strict broadcast guidelines that allowed the events to be broadcast on live TV, radio and online. So they followed proper production standards and so on when visiting, a particular pub. So the one in Ballsbridge, for example, was a key one. Excuse me. Our multidiscipline strategic approach ensured a unified consumer-facing proposition. We leveraged experiential, so events. That's one of our tools in MarCom, or your IMC. PR, digital, media, relationship marketing, and in-pub point of sale to ensure the activity was seamlessly integrated across all activation platforms. Now, obviously, this is a Guinness writing about their campaign. And they're using their own terminology for the MarComs that they used in their IMC. And so that's why those headings are different to the ones you normally talk about in the MarCom toolbox. But they're just organized differently. It's the same stuff. So true consumer engagement took place because we had strong offline experiences, seamlessly driving relevant online and offline conversations, events, and recruitment. So we'll see what they mean in a second. So program execution. So how did the plan actually work? The implementation of the plan. So here's an example. That's actually the Ballsbridge one. So building the expectation and excitement in the lead up to rugby games. So they have these nights out, pub-based. Guinness's natural home is in a pub. So each event was located in a different key rugby pub around the country. So obviously, following the calendar across the year. For one game, it would be this pub. For the next game, it'd be another pub in a different part of the country, and moving around. So they're getting that coverage across the whole country. So with the events, we created a roadshow of 14 Guinness rugby events that were broadcast live on TV, radio and online in the lead up to big rugby weekends. Fans had an opportunity to be in the audience to meet and talk to guests, which included players and pundits like David Wallace, Johnny Sexton, Sergey Betson, Dewey Morris and Jeremy Guscott. Each show lasted about 90 minutes. So digital amplification. So this is how do we spread the word about these? So the in-pub event is offline, and anything digital is online, obviously. So only Guinness Facebook fans had an opportunity to attend the special invite-only events. So obviously, if you wanted to go to one of these pubs and get a ticket for that event, you had to sign up to you had to follow the page and obviously get it through there. So that's, using the online to drive offline and vice versa. So the events were streamed live on the Guinness Facebook page. Live questions and comments from Guinness Facebook, Twitter, and SMS were incorporated directly into these events. Obviously, if they were doing this campaign again, if they were planning this to run over the next rugby season, they probably would use different social media, and perhaps you could think about how would it be different if it was running today or being planned today. So more on how this plan was implemented. So live radio for different matches, we partnered with different national radio stations. So moving it around and picking up different potential customers from the different radio stations. So different radio stations would have different target audiences. And so it's a clever thing to move it around and perhaps hit more people in that case. Creating unique content for the stations. So it's attractive to the station to get on board with this because they're getting this content free. And it fills airtime for them and probably is an attractive thing for their listenership. So our radio partners included RTE Radio 1, Today FM and Cool FM. All radio shows were broadcast during drive time, a key listening period. And again, choosing that time is based on their knowledge of their target market and when they're most likely to be listening to the radio and so on. So highlights show, 30 minutes highlights version of the show. So they obviously cut it down. And that was then broadcast the following night on TV3, which is or was at the time the largest independent TV station in Ireland. And then the Sky Pub channel. So this is a channel on Sky, as the name suggests, but it's only available in pubs. So anybody who wants to watch something on this TV station has to actually consume it, has to go to a pub that subscribes to it. We partner with Sky Pub channel to turn these events into a footfall driver for the entire pub trade. This partnership allows us to broadcast each event live to pubs throughout Ireland, creating unique rugby content that's exclusive to the pub. Remember, most of Guinness's sales tend to be in a pub. When people buy off-license stuff, they're less likely to buy Guinness. They'll drink something else at home, but they'll drink Guinness in the pub, and that's been their experience. So that's why they want to draw people to come into the pub to get this material. So Guinness then leveraged the weight of their relationship marketing program to create an occasion around the in-pub broadcasts, creating awareness among consumers and incentivizing them to get down to their local pub with their friends to watch the event. So making every pub, turning it this match day and the day before match day and all this sort of stuff, it turns it into a social event. So everybody congregates in that pub to watch this content. Now, how are we different? So we differentiated ourselves from other brands in the rugby space by not just driving awareness, but focusing on participation. It's all about getting them in, going to the pub and having that social interaction with other rugby fans. So it's getting all the fans together to watch this content or go to the pub where this content is actually being produced. We moved from traditional one-way communication, so just advertising, mass advertising, to more immersive activity that enriched the consumer's rugby experience. This transformation to a more experiential and promotional approach has delivered a step change in performance. So here's more images taken from the event. So this is from the Facebook page. So these would be where the links, this is what it looked like. So people had to click on the link to register for a particular event and so on. And then they had a countdown, just generating that buzz and anticipation in lead up to the next, whatever it is, the next broadcast. And that would reset every time then for the next one. Excuse me. So watch the last event. So it had an opportunity. If you missed it, you could rewatch something else as well. There's some images taken from some of the events and so on, some of the pundits and people involved. So how did it go? The results. With any campaign, we want to be able to look back and reflect. Was it successful? Did we achieve what we wanted to achieve? And that's the whole point at the start of making SMART objectives. So those objectives being specific and measurable and so on means at the end we can say, well, did we hit those numbers? Did we achieve that target at the end of the time that was allocated for the campaign? So in terms of our awareness targets, exceeded target. So Guinness is now the #1 sponsor of rugby in Ireland, Lansdowne Millward Brown. So that's a well-known market research company in Ireland. They do a lot of surveys and that kind of thing in Ireland and the UK. So their tracking shows Guinness overtaking Heineken, as 45% of consumers now recognise Guinness as the #1 sponsor of rugby in Ireland, beating Heineken. So 37% of people questioned thought Heineken were the main sponsors, compared to 45% of people saying Guinness. So it's not about, in this case, these numbers are about people's perception rather than who actually is spending more money sponsoring rugby events. So that was awareness, exceeded target, participation. So again, exceeded target. Participation is a key driver of this improved score, with 29% of consumers having participated in a Guinness rugby activity. Versus 8% for Heineken. And again, that's Millward Brown tracking that data. So other statistics, nearly 52,000 rugby fans immersed in a Guinness Area 22 event in the last 12 months versus 9,000 the previous year in something similar. So every year they do various events and so on. So huge increase in engagement in those kinds of events. 2,600 fans attended an Area 22 supporters night. So they're the 50,000 watched the events online. And obviously that can be tracked because it's on Facebook. Everything on Facebook is trackable. Everything online is trackable, really. And 158,000 fans tuned in to each radio broadcast, and 1 million watched the events on TV. So when they showed the highlights the day after, 1 million were tuning in. So conclusion of all of that, due to the success of the Guinness rugby activation in Ireland, rugby is now one of the 3 business drivers for Guinness across Europe. So obviously with the success in Ireland, they expanded it out to the rest of the continent. This is testament to the success of the programme at raising the profile of the brand, growing affinity through deep engagement with consumers, and driving volume through recruiting of new drinkers to the brand. So looking over here again, Guinness Rugby Facebook page is the #1 sports fan page in Ireland with over 63,000 fans. So obviously people had to sign up and follow the Facebook page in order to engage with the content. And so that got them onto the page. PR coverage delivered an editorial value of 7 million, and that's nearly 300% up on the previous year, so 3 times what their campaigns would have achieved in previous years, the previous year. Okay, so there are all the participation stats. Then number 3, the conversion. So this was the 10,000 number. Through Guinness's independent market research, they have quantified the number of drinkers switching to Guinness due to the rugby activity, and this is confirmed as 10,000. So obviously this is something approximate, that's why it's such an even number. In a market declining by 5%, Guinness's volume in outlets with rugby activation grew by 6% and 13.5%. Excuse me. And it grew by 13.5% in outlets with the experiential activation. So the pubs where they had events, there was a bigger effect, obviously, more than double the effect. But in random pubs around the country where it was just available online and on the pub channel, there was that 6%. In addition to the above, rugby has also been a key contributor to the overall positive equity shifts in the Guinness brand in Ireland. Excuse me. So now you can see how this is just one example, obviously, of an IMC, but hopefully it kind of puts it into context and see how everything knits together. Nothing is in conflict. It's all these elements are working together. So the Facebook, the radio, the television, and the events, the events in the pubs themselves. They're all different elements of your IMC mix, and they're all coming together, putting out the same vibe. So that's what you have to think about in terms of working on the your IMC for your CA. Okay, thank you.